The Hilton Grand Ballroom in downtown Columbus blazed with a kind of wealth most people only glimpsed through television screens. Crystal chandeliers scattered prismatic light across 500 guests dressed in evening wear that cost more than Marcus Hayes earned in 3 months. Champagne flutes caught the glow like captured stars, and the air hummed with the particular frequency of money talking to itself. Marcus stood at the back of the room near the service entrance, his jeans still carrying faint traces of motor oil no amount of scrubbing could fully remove. His jacket came from the Goodwill on High Street, purchased 4 years ago when he still believed he might need something presentable for job interviews that never came. The calluses on his hands told the story of a decade spent beneath the hoods of broken vehicles, and the exhaustion in his eyes spoke of a 5-year-old boy waiting at home with questions about why his father looked so worried lately. He had come here to pick up his wife from what she had described as a work event, something low-key, something that wouldn't take long. The master of ceremonies adjusted his microphone, and the crowd hushed with the practiced deference of people who understood when to pay attention. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct privilege to welcome the woman who built Apex Capital from nothing but determination and vision. Our founder, our leader, one of the most successful investors of her generation. Please join me in celebrating V. Reed. Applause thundered through the room like a physical force. The woman who stepped to the microphone wore a simple black gown, no jewelry except for a thin gold chain at her throat, and yet she radiated more authority than anyone else in that glittering space. Her posture was impeccable, her gaze steady as she surveyed the room. Marcus felt his world tilt on its axis. That was his wife. The quiet woman who had moved into his cramped apartment 3 months ago with a single suitcase. The woman who had fumbled through making macaroni and cheese while consulting her phone for instructions. The woman everyone in her family dismissed as a failure, an embarrassment. The unmarried aunt who had somehow never made anything of herself. She was a billionaire, and she had never told him. 3 months earlier, the September air had carried the first whisper of autumn as Marcus guided his aging Ford pickup through the streets of Clintonville. The neighborhood had seen better decades, its small houses and modest apartment buildings wearing their age like badges of perseverance. He had grown up 6 blocks from his current address, knew every crack in the sidewalk, every tree that had been planted, and every one that had been cut down. In the rearview mirror, his son Liam dozed in his car seat, one small hand clutching a velociraptor plush toy that had long ago lost most of its stuffing. The dinosaur's name was Rex, and according to Liam, Rex was the bravest creature in the entire world. The boy was 5 years old, missing his 2 front teeth, and possessed a laugh that could make even the darkest day feel survivable. Marcus pulled into the parking lot of his apartment complex and killed the engine. For a moment, he simply sat there, watching his son sleep, feeling the weight of everything that had led them to this point. Sarah had been gone for 3 years now. 3 years since a drunk driver ran a red light on Broad Street. 3 years since Marcus had stood in a hospital hallway and learned that the woman he loved, the mother of his 2-year-old son, had died on the operating table. 3 years since the world had stopped making sense. He had rebuilt himself piece by piece, day by day, not for his own sake, but for the small boy who needed a father who could function, who deserved stability and love, and someone who would never abandon him. Marcus had taken every overtime shift the shop offered. He had learned to braid hair by watching YouTube videos at midnight. He had memorized the names of every dinosaur in Liam's picture books, had sat through countless nightmares, had dried countless tears. And now, 48 hours from now, he was supposed to marry Nicole Hartley. The thought should have filled him with hope. 2 years ago, Nicole had walked into Brennan's auto repair with a BMW that was making a concerning noise. and she had looked at Marcus like he was worth something. She was beautiful in a polished, deliberate way, with ambition radiating from every carefully chosen word. She had told him she admired his dedication to his son. She had said Liam deserved a mother. She had made promises that Marcus, lonely and exhausted and desperate to believe, had accepted without question. But lately, something had shifted. Nicole's smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. Her attention wandered during conversations about Liam. She checked her phone constantly, tilting it away from Marcus's line of sight. He told himself he was imagining things, told himself that pre-wedding stress affected everyone differently, told himself that in 2 days they would stand before their families and begin a new chapter. Marcus carried his sleeping son up the stairs to their second-floor apartment, moving with the practiced silence of a parent who had learned to navigate darkness without waking a child. Liam stirred slightly as Marcus lowered him into his small bed, his fingers tightening on Rex before relaxing again. In the living room, a framed photograph of Sarah smiled from the bookshelf. It had been taken on their honeymoon in Gatlinburg, her dark hair wind-blown, her eyes full of the future they had planned together. Marcus touched the frame briefly, a ritual he performed every night. I'm trying to give him a good life. The next morning arrived with the kind of golden light that made Columbus look almost beautiful. Marcus dropped Liam at preschool with the usual ritual, a hug, a promise to pick him up at exactly 5 o'clock, and the question that Liam asked every single day. You promise to be there, Daddy? The boy's eyes were wide with the particular anxiety of a child who had learned too young that people could disappear without warning. Marcus knelt to meet his son's gaze. I promise, buddy. Have I ever broken a promise to you? Liam shook his head solemnly. No, Daddy, never. And I never will. Now go learn something amazing, okay? Tell me all about it tonight. At Murphy's Auto Repair, the morning passed in the familiar rhythm of diagnostic work and customer service. The shop occupied a corner lot in German Village, its brick exterior weathered by 40 years of Columbus seasons. Inside, the smell of motor oil and coffee mingled with the sound of classic rock playing from a paint-spattered radio. Walter Murphy himself sat in his usual spot near the office door, a 70-year-old man with silver hair and hands that trembled slightly now, but had once rebuilt engines with surgical precision. He had owned this shop since before Marcus was born, had hired Marcus as a 19-year-old kid with nothing but a high school diploma and a willingness to work. 10 years later, Marcus ran the daily operations as shop manager. He knew the business inside and out, knew every client's name, knew which mechanics worked best together and which needed to be kept apart. Walter trusted him completely, and that trust meant more to Marcus than any paycheck. The morning's challenge arrived in the form of a stubborn Chevy Silverado that 3 other shops had failed to diagnose properly. Marcus listened to the engine, his eyes closed, his mind filtering through possibilities. The sound was subtle, a faint ticking that most mechanics would attribute to normal wear. But Marcus heard something else beneath it. Timing chain tensioner. Give it another month and you'll be looking at a full engine replacement. Let us fix it now and you're looking at $800, parts and labor. The owner, a skeptical contractor who had already spent $2,000 on unnecessary repairs elsewhere, squinted at him. Other guys said it was the fuel injectors. Then they said it was the exhaust manifold. Marcus shrugged. Then they were wrong. Your call. Walter chuckled from his chair. Son, I've watched this boy listen to engines for 10 years. He's never been wrong once. I wouldn't bet against him. The contractor agreed to the repair. That afternoon, Marcus finished early and drove to the Ashford family home to finalize wedding details with Nicole. The house sat in Upper Arlington, a sprawling colonial that spoke of generational wealth and country club memberships. Marcus had never felt comfortable here, surrounded by furniture that cost more than his annual salary. But in 2 days, this would technically be his family too. He arrived 30 minutes early, hoping to surprise Nicole with the wildflowers he had picked from a field near his apartment complex. They weren't expensive or elegant, but she had once told him she loved simple things. That felt like a long time ago now. He parked in the circular driveway and approached the house, but stopped when he heard Nicole's voice drifting through an open window. She was in the kitchen, her tone light and playful in a way Marcus hadn't heard directed at him in months. "Clayton, baby, I can't wait to see you tonight." Marcus's hand froze on the door handle. No, he doesn't suspect anything. He's too busy playing super dad to notice what's right in front of him. Her laugh carried through the window, careless and cruel. I know. But what was I supposed to do when we met? I thought he had potential. Turns out he's just a mechanic with a kid and no future. The wildflowers dropped from Marcus's fingers, scattering across the porch steps. You're the upgrade I've been waiting for. Clayton Shaw. Even his name sounds like money, doesn't it? Not like Marcus Hayes. God, it sounds like a hardware store. Marcus stood paralyzed, each word landing like a physical blow. A mechanic with a kid and no future. An upgrade. The phrases burned themselves into his consciousness with terrible clarity. Every instinct screamed at him to burst through that door, to confront her, to demand an explanation. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. His jaw tightened until his teeth ached. But then, from inside the house, he heard his son's voice. "Daddy? Daddy, are you here?" Liam had apparently arrived with Nicole's mother and was now looking for him. Marcus looked through the window and saw Nicole's expression flicker with annoyance at the interruption. She was already moving to end her phone call, already preparing to slip back into the mask of the loving fiancé. In that moment, Marcus made a choice. Not from weakness, but from love. If he confronted Nicole now, Liam would witness it. The boy would see his father shouting, would see the woman he had started calling Miss Nicole revealed as a liar, would carry that memory forever. No. Whatever happened next, it would happen on Marcus's terms, not in front of his son. He retreated silently from the porch, walked back to his truck, and sat behind the wheel for 10 minutes, breathing slowly, methodically, until he could control the tremor in his hands. Then he drove around the block, returned to the driveway, and knocked on the front door as if he had just arrived. Nicole greeted him with a smile that now looked like a weapon. "Marcus, sweetheart, you're early. Come in. He spent the next hour discussing seating arrangements and menu options, his voice steady, his face neutral, while inside he was slowly falling apart. Liam sat on his lap, chattering about dinosaurs, oblivious to the devastation that had reshaped his father's world. That night, after Liam was asleep, Marcus sat in the darkness of his living room and stared at the wall until dawn. He did not cry. He did not break anything. He simply sat there, turning the pieces over in his mind, trying to figure out what to do with the life that had just shattered for the second time. The engagement party was supposed to be a celebration. Both families had gathered at a rented venue in Grandview Heights, approximately 80 people making small talk and sipping champagne under strings of decorative lights. Michael had planned every detail, from the color of the napkins to the playlist of carefully curated songs. Marcus stood near the entrance, Liam beside him in a tiny suit jacket that the boy had pronounced super fancy. He watched the guests arrive, accepting congratulations with a smile that felt carved from stone. His mind kept replaying Nicole's words from the day before. A mechanic with a kid and no future. He had decided to wait, to see what she would do. Some part of him, the part that still wanted to believe in the life they had planned together, hoped that he had misunderstood somehow, that there was an explanation, that 2 years of his devotion had not been a complete waste. By 9 o'clock, Marcus noticed that Nicole had disappeared from the main room. He checked the restrooms, the patio, the parking lot. Nothing. His phone buzzed with a text message. The words on the screen seemed to pulse with malice. Marcus, I'm sorry. I can't do this. I've met someone else. His name is Clayton Shaw, and he can give me the life I deserve. Don't try to find me. Don't call. It's over. I hope you understand. For a long moment, Marcus simply stared at the message. Then he looked up and realized that something had shifted in the room. People were glancing at their phones, then looking at him with expressions that ranged from pity to barely concealed amusement. Someone had been filming in the parking lot. Someone had captured Nicole leaving with another man, climbing into a Mercedes that probably cost more than Marcus would earn in 3 years. The video was already circulating through the family group chat. The whispers started as a murmur and built to a crescendo. Marcus felt every eye in the room turned toward him. Not direct stares for the most part, sidelong glances, quickly averted gazes, the special kind of attention reserved for public humiliation. A hand tugged at his sleeve. Marcus looked down to find Liam standing beside him. The boy's face crumpled with confusion and the first stirrings of fear. Daddy, why is everyone looking at us? Where's Miss Nicole? Marcus knelt down and pulled his son close, shielding him from the crowd with his body. His voice emerged steady, despite the chaos inside his chest. Everything's okay, buddy. We're going to go home now, okay? It's been a long night. But the party, Daddy. The cake. We'll have our own cake. A better one. Just you and me. He lifted Liam into his arms and walked toward the exit. No one tried to stop him. No one offered comfort. They simply watched him go, a man carrying his son through the wreckage of his second chance at happiness. In the truck, Liam fell asleep within minutes, exhausted by the late hour and the emotional confusion he couldn't articulate. Marcus drove home in silence, his hands tight on the steering wheel, his mind completely blank. It wasn't until he had carried his son to bed and kissed his forehead that the reality finally hit him. He sank onto the living room couch and pressed his hands against his face, and for the first time in 3 years, Marcus Hayes allowed himself to fall apart. The weeks that followed were a special kind of torture. In a city like Columbus, scandals burned fast and bright. Within days, everyone seemed to know the story of the mechanic who got dumped at his own engagement party. The narrative spread through church groups, neighborhood associations, through PTA meetings and break room conversations. Marcus became a cautionary tale, a punchline, a symbol of what happened when a working-class man reached above his station. At the shop, most of his colleagues offered awkward sympathy before retreating to their usual distance. But Marcus heard the jokes anyway. The comments about needing an upgrade, the speculation about whether he had really believed a woman like Nicole would settle for a guy like him. Only Walter Murphy treated him exactly the same as before. The old man pulled Marcus into the office on the 3rd day after the disaster and closed the door. I've known you 10 years, son. I watched you bury your wife and raise that boy alone. I've never seen you quit anything in your life. Marcus stared at the floor. This is different. No, it isn't. Walter's voice carried the weight of 7 decades of hard-won wisdom. People will talk. Let them. Talk doesn't mean a damn thing. What matters is what you do next. What matters is that little boy at home who needs his father to keep standing. I don't know how to keep standing. One day at a time. 1 hour, 1 minute if that's all you can manage. You put one foot in front of the other until walking feels natural again. That's how a man survives. Marcus looked up at the old man who had been more of a father to him than his own blood. What if I'm not enough? What if Nicole was right? Walter's expression hardened with fierce certainty. A woman who would say those things was never right about anything. Your value doesn't come from what others think of you, Marcus. It comes from who you are. And you are a good man. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The words helped, not enough to heal, but enough to survive. At home, the situation was worse. Liam absorbed the tension like a sponge, even if he couldn't understand its source. He started having nightmares again, the way he had in the months after his mother's death. He asked questions that Marcus couldn't answer. Why doesn't Miss Nicole come over anymore? Why are the kids at school being mean? Is Daddy sad? Marcus could endure his own humiliation. He couldn't endure watching his son suffer for it. 3 weeks after the engagement party collapsed, Marcus was putting Liam to bed when someone knocked on the apartment door. The sound was soft, almost hesitant, completely unlike the aggressive pounding of bill collectors or the cheerful rhythm of neighbors. He found a woman standing in the hallway. It took him several seconds to place her face. Vivian Ashford, Nicole's aunt. The quiet one who sat in corners at family gatherings, wearing unremarkable clothes, speaking only when directly addressed. The family treated her as an afterthought, the unmarried sister who had somehow failed to make anything of herself. Marcus had exchanged perhaps a dozen words with her over the past 2 years. She was 38 years old, 7 years older than Nicole. Her features were pleasant but unmemorable, the kind of face that cameras seemed to overlook. She wore a gray cardigan and faded jeans. No jewelry, no makeup. Everything about her appearance suggested a woman who had learned to move through the world without being noticed. But her eyes told a different story. They were sharp, observant, full of an intelligence that seemed completely at odds with the persona she projected. "May I come in?" Her voice was calm, measured, completely self-possessed. Marcus stepped aside, too surprised to refuse. Vivian entered the small apartment and looked around without judgment. She took in the modest furniture, the photographs on the walls, the evidence of a single father doing his best with limited resources. Then she turned to face him directly. "I have a proposition, one that could help us both." Marcus crossed his arms, suddenly wary. "What kind of proposition?" "Marriage." The word hung in the air between them, completely absurd. Marcus almost laughed. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. The scandal is destroying your reputation and affecting your son. My family is pressuring me to marry before I become even more of an embarrassment to them. A union between us solves both problems." He shook his head, struggling to process the suggestion. "I'm not marrying someone just to save face. It's not about your face. It's about Liam." The use of his son's name stopped Marcus cold. Vivian leaned forward slightly, her gaze intense. "Right now, he's the child of the man who got publicly humiliated by his fiancée. That story will follow him through school, through his teenage years, into his adult life. Children are cruel. Parents are crueler. But if you move forward, if you show the world that you found someone else, that you chose to move on rather than wallow, the narrative changes. You're no longer the victim. You're the man who found something better." The logic was cold, almost clinical. But beneath the calculation, Marcus heard something else. something that sounded almost like understanding. And what do you get out of this? For the first time, something flickered in Vivian's carefully controlled expression. I have my reasons. Reasons I'd rather not explain right now. But I can promise you this. I won't interfere with your life. I won't try to replace anyone. I just need a marriage that keeps certain people from asking certain questions. That's not an answer. It's the only one I'm willing to give at this moment. Marcus studied her, trying to read the woman beneath the neutral surface. Every instinct told him this was insane. Marrying a woman he barely knew, a woman connected to the person who had just destroyed him. It violated every rule of common sense. But then he thought about Liam, about the whispers that would follow his son for years, about the pity that would shape how people saw the boy before he ever had a chance to define himself. If I agree, there are rules. Liam comes first, always. You don't make decisions about him without me. And if this arrangement stops working, we end it clean. No drama, no complications. Agreed. And I need to know one thing. He held her gaze with as much intensity as he could muster. Is someone forcing you to do this? For the first time, something shifted in Vivian's expression. Not quite vulnerability, but close. No one forces me to do anything. I'm choosing this, just like you are. Marcus looked toward his son's closed bedroom door, then back at the woman who was proposing to solve his problem with a transaction that made no sense. 3 weeks. That gives me time to be sure. Vivian nodded. 3 weeks. She moved toward the door but paused before leaving. Marcus, for what it's worth, I don't think Nicole was right about you. I think she was incapable of seeing what mattered. Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving him alone with a decision that felt both impossible and inevitable. That night, Marcus sat at his small kitchen table with the bills that had been accumulating since the engagement party. $800 for rent, 2 weeks overdue. $62 in his checking account, an electric shutoff notice warning that he had 72 hours to pay or lose power. He had been so focused on the wedding, on building a future with Nicole, that he had let everything else slide, and now he was paying the price. In the other room, Liam cried out in his sleep. Marcus went to him immediately, found the boy thrashing against his blankets, caught in the grip of a nightmare. Daddy, don't leave! Please don't leave! Marcus gathered his son into his arms, held him tight until the trembling stopped. I'm here, buddy. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? I promise. Liam's breathing gradually slowed, his small body relaxing into sleep once more. Marcus stayed there, holding his son, thinking about Vivian's words, about narratives that followed children into adulthood, about choices made not from desire, but from necessity. When he finally laid Liam back down and returned to the kitchen, Marcus found himself looking at the calendar on the wall. 3 weeks from today. 3 weeks to decide whether to marry a woman he didn't know for reasons he didn't fully understand. But somewhere in the back of his mind, beneath the exhaustion and the grief and the humiliation, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, this strange proposal was exactly what both of them needed. He just had no idea how right that voice would turn out to be, or how wrong everything else he thought he knew would prove to be, or that the quiet woman who had stood in his doorway was about to change his life in ways that had nothing to do with saving face and everything to do with something he had stopped believing was possible. 3 weeks passed like water through cupped hands. Marcus went through the motions of daily life with mechanical precision, dropping Liam at preschool each morning, working his shifts at the shop, picking up his son at exactly 5 o'clock. The routine held him together when nothing else could, On a Tuesday afternoon, he found himself standing in front of the Franklin County Courthouse, staring up at the limestone facade as if seeing it for the first time. Vivian waited near the entrance, wearing the same gray cardigan she had worn the night she proposed. She carried no bouquet, no traditional markers of a bride, just a small leather purse and an expression that revealed nothing. Liam held Marcus's hand, dressed in the button-down shirt and khakis they had purchased at Target the day before. The boy clutched Rex in his other hand, the velociraptor's worn fabric, a comfort object he refused to leave behind. "Daddy, are we really getting married today?" The question carried no excitement, no childish wonder, just confusion wrapped in the careful tone of a 5-year-old who had learned that adult decisions rarely made sense. "Yeah, buddy, Miss Vivian is going to live with us for a while." "Does that mean she's going to be like Mommy?" Marcus's throat tightened. He knelt down to meet his son's eyes. "No one is going to be like Mommy, but Miss Vivian is a good person, and she's going to be part of our family. Is that okay?" Liam considered this with the seriousness that childhood trauma breeds too early. "Will she read me stories?" "We'll have to ask her." The courthouse ceremony took 11 minutes. A judge Marcus had never met read words from a script he had probably delivered 1,000 times. Vivian's hand was cool and steady when they exchanged rings, thin bands Marcus had purchased from a pawn shop on Parsons Avenue. They cost $38 together. When the judge pronounced them married, Liam tugged at Vivian's sleeve. "Does this mean you live with us now?" She glanced at Marcus, uncertainty flickering across her features for just a moment. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm going to stay with you and your daddy for a while." The boy thought about this, then nodded. "Okay. Can you read me a bedtime story tonight?" Something softened in Vivian's expression. "We'll see." They walked out of the courthouse into autumn sunlight that felt too bright for the occasion. No rice, no champagne, no well-wishers. Just 3 people bound together by paperwork and circumstances neither of them fully understood yet. Vivian moved into the apartment that evening. She arrived with the same single suitcase she had brought the night of her proposal, declining Marcus's offer to help carry it up the stairs. The second bedroom, which had been serving as a storage space for boxes Marcus kept meaning to sort through, became hers by default. She spent an hour transforming it into something habitable. When Marcus checked on her, he found she had pushed the boxes into the closet and created a space that was almost monastic in its simplicity. A bed with white sheets. A small desk she had apparently purchased earlier that day. A lamp. Nothing on the walls. No photographs, no decorations. No trace of personality or history. "You don't have to stay in here," Marcus heard himself say. "I mean, this is your home now too. You can use the living room, the kitchen, whatever you need." "Thank you. I prefer not to intrude." "You're not intruding. You're my wife." The word felt strange in his mouth, foreign, like trying on clothes that belonged to someone else. "Legally, yes, but we both know what this is." She turned back to arranging her sparse belongings, and Marcus understood that the conversation was over. The first week unfolded in careful silence. Vivian woke before Marcus each morning, before even his alarm clock dragged him from sleep. He would find a cup of coffee waiting outside his bedroom door, still hot, prepared exactly the way he liked it, even though he couldn't remember ever telling her his preferences. She made herself scarce during the hours when Marcus and Liam occupied the common spaces. If they were in the kitchen, she retreated to her room. If they watched television in the evening, she found tasks that kept her elsewhere. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, leaving no trace of herself except for the coffee and the meticulously clean kitchen each morning. Dinner became their only shared ritual, But even that felt more like a negotiation than a gathering. Vivian would prepare simple meals, foods she was clearly still learning to cook from online recipes. The first night, she served pasta that had been boiled slightly too long, with sauce from a jar that she had attempted to improve with herbs that didn't quite work together. Liam ate it without complaint, more interested in telling his father about the frog he had seen at school than in critiquing the meal. Marcus forced himself to finish his plate, aware of Vivian's eyes tracking his reactions, even though she pretended to be focused on her own food. "It's good. Thank you." "You don't have to lie. I know it's not right." "You're learning. That's what matters." She said nothing more, but Marcus noticed that the next night's meal was better, and the night after that, better still. At Murphy's Auto Repair, Walter watched Marcus with the sharp eyes of a man who had spent 70 years reading people. On Friday afternoon, he called Marcus into his office and closed the door. "You got married." It wasn't a question. Walter had somehow known, though Marcus hadn't told anyone at the shop. "Yeah, Tuesday." To that quiet woman from the Coles family, Vivian. News travels fast. Walter leaned back in his creaking office chair. "In this city? Always has. You want to tell me what this is really about?" Marcus considered lying, then decided Walter deserved better. "It's complicated. We're helping each other out, that's all." Helping each other out. That's what you call marriage these days? "It's what I call this one." The old man studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. It's your life, son. But let me give you some advice anyway. Whatever you think this arrangement is, whatever rules you've set up in your head about how it's supposed to work, marriage has a way of becoming whatever it wants to be. You can't control it any more than you can control the weather. We have an understanding. So did I and my wife when we first got hitched, 52 years ago. You know what that understanding turned into? Everything I never knew I needed." Marcus didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Walter seemed to understand. Just don't be so busy protecting yourself that you miss what's right in front of you. That night, Marcus came home late from a job that had run longer than expected. The apartment was dark except for a soft glow coming from Liam's room. He walked toward it, expecting to find his son asleep with the nightlight on. Instead, he found Vivian sitting on the edge of the bed. Her voice was barely above a whisper, telling a story Marcus didn't recognize. "And the little lion walked and walked. He was scared because the jungle was so big and he was so small. But he kept going because he remembered what his father told him." Liam's eyes were heavy with sleep, but still open, fixed on Vivian with complete attention. "What did his father tell him?" "That being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. Being brave means you keep walking, even when you are." The boy's hand was wrapped around Vivian's fingers, holding on even as consciousness began to slip away. She sat there for another minute after his breathing deepened into sleep, making sure he was truly gone before gently freeing her hand. When she stood and turned, she saw Marcus watching from the doorway. Something like embarrassment crossed her face, as if she had been caught doing something she shouldn't. "He had a nightmare. I heard him crying. I hope it was okay that I came in." Marcus's throat felt tight. "More than okay. Thank you." She moved past him into the hallway, and for just a moment their shoulders brushed. Neither of them pulled away. After she had disappeared into her room, Marcus stood in Liam's doorway watching his son sleep. The boy looked peaceful in a way he hadn't since Sarah died, since Nicole left, since the world had taught him that people vanished without warning. Something was shifting in the apartment, something Marcus couldn't name yet, but could feel like the change in air pressure before a storm. The next morning brought an unexpected warmth, Indian summer asserting itself one last time before winter claimed Ohio for good. Marcus woke to find not just coffee outside his door, but also a note written in precise, careful handwriting. Liam asked if we could make his favorite breakfast together. If you're willing to teach me, I'm willing to learn. He found them in the kitchen an hour later. Vivian had clearly been attempting to make pancakes, but the evidence of her struggle was everywhere. Batter on the counter, a pan smoking slightly on the stove, and Liam standing on a step stool trying to help while simultaneously making everything more complicated. "Daddy, we're making pancakes, but they keep getting stuck." Vivian turned from the stove, and Marcus saw something he hadn't seen before. Frustration, yes, but also determination. And beneath that, a kind of vulnerability that her usual careful composure kept hidden. "I watched 3 different videos. I don't understand why they're not working." Marcus crossed to the stove and assessed the situation. The heat was too high, the pan too dry, the first flip attempted too early. Beginner mistakes, all of them. "Here, let me show you." He adjusted the burner, added a small amount of butter to the pan, demonstrated the proper pour and the patience required to wait for bubbles before flipping. Vivian watched with absolute focus, asking questions about temperature and timing that revealed an analytical mind trying to solve a problem. They worked side by side, their movements gradually synchronizing into something almost choreographed. When Vivian's first successful pancake emerged golden and fluffy, Liam cheered as if she had won an Olympic medal. "Ellie, you did it! You made it perfect!" Marcus nearly dropped the spatula he was holding. Ellie. Not Miss Vivian, not ma'am, not any of the formal addresses Liam had been using. A nickname, a term of endearment, a door the boy had chosen to open himself. Vivian looked stunned, her carefully maintained composure cracking just enough for Marcus to see something raw underneath. Something that looked like hope and hunger and a kind of desperate longing all tangled together. "I had a good teacher," she managed, her voice not quite steady. They ate breakfast together, the 3 of them crowded around the small kitchen table. The pancakes were still imperfect, some too thin, others slightly burned, but Liam devoured them with enthusiasm that had nothing to do with culinary excellence and everything to do with feeling like a family again, even if none of them would have said it out loud. After breakfast, after Liam had been dropped at preschool and Marcus had headed to the shop, Vivian sat alone in the apartment with her laptop open. The screen displayed financial reports from Apex Capital, market analyses, investment proposals. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, approving transactions worth more money than Marcus earned in a decade. All from the second-hand desk in a cramped bedroom in Clintonville. Her phone buzzed. Russell Kane, her head of security. "V, we've got a situation with the Shaw matter. He's been making inquiries about you." "What kind of inquiries?" "Trying to find out who you really are. He's hired a private investigator. Second rate, but persistent." Vivian's jaw tightened. "Let him look. He won't find anything that connects Vivian Ashford to V. Reed. The corporate structures are too layered." "What about the husband? Should I run a deeper background check? Make sure he's not involved somehow?" "No, Marcus has nothing to do with this. Leave him out of it." She ended the call and pulled up another file. Clayton Shaw's financial records, obtained through channels that would have troubled Marcus's sense of right and wrong if he had known about them. The pattern was clear once you knew where to look. 3 previous victims, all women with resources, all following the same trajectory. Romance, promises, financial entanglement, then disappearance. Nicole was being played by a professional. And from what Vivian's investigators had uncovered, Clayton was currently pursuing what he thought would be his biggest score yet, a logistics company acquisition that would provide the cash flow to maintain his lifestyle indefinitely. Vivian opened a new email to Russell. I want to know everything about the Midwestern freight acquisition Clayton Shaw is pursuing. Company financials, ownership structure, timeline. And Russell, I want to know who else is bidding. His response came within minutes. Already on it. Preliminary intel suggests 2 other bidders, both regional competitors. Shaw is leveraging credit he doesn't actually have. If any of his lines get pulled, the whole thing collapses. Then let's make sure his lines get pulled. She sent 3 more emails before noon, each one setting in motion a cascade of financial maneuvering that Clayton Shaw would never see coming. His credit applications would be quietly denied. His business references would fail to respond to verification calls. His timeline would slip just enough to miss the window. By the time she closed her laptop, Clayton's big score was already circling the drain. He just didn't know it yet. That afternoon, Marcus faced a crisis of his own. Walter called him into the office with an expression that made Marcus's stomach drop before the old man even opened his mouth. Son, I need to tell you something. Been putting it off, but you deserve to know. What is it? Walter's hands trembled as he folded them on the desk. I've had an offer. On the shop. A real offer. From a development company. More money than I ever thought this place was worth. The world seemed to tilt slightly. You're selling. My kids have been on me for years, saying I need to retire, that I'm working myself into an early grave. And with how my hands shake now, with the chest pains I've been having? He trailed off, and Marcus saw the guilt in the old man's eyes. What about the staff? That was when Walter's expression crumbled completely. The buyer wants to bring in their own people. They're planning to tear down the building, put up apartments. It's a done deal, Marcus. End of the month. The words hit like physical blows. This shop was more than his job. It was the place where Walter had given him a chance when no one else would. The foundation of everything he had built. The means by which he fed his son. I tried to negotiate. Tried to get them to keep the staff, at least give you all first right of refusal on jobs with their other properties. But they weren't interested. They've got their own crews. Marcus felt himself nodding, heard himself saying something about understanding, about Walter deserving to take care of himself. But inside, he was falling. Losing the shop meant losing stability. Losing stability meant losing his ability to provide. Losing that meant failing Liam in every way that mattered. He finished his shift in a daze, barely registering the work his hands performed out of muscle memory. When 5 o'clock came, he drove to pick up Liam with a plan forming in his mind. He would spend the evening making calls, sending resumes, reaching out to every contact he had in the automotive industry. There had to be another option. There had to be a way forward. But when he got home, when he saw Vivian preparing dinner while Liam colored at the kitchen table, something stopped him from sharing the news. Pride, maybe. Or shame. The same instinct that had kept him from crying in front of his son, from showing weakness even when he felt like he was drowning. How is work? Vivian's question was casual, but her eyes were sharp. She saw more than people thought she did. Marcus had started to realize that. Fine. Busy. And you, Liam? What did you learn today? The boy launched into an elaborate story about the life cycle of butterflies, complete with hand gestures and sound effects. Marcus let the words wash over him, focusing on his son's joy to avoid thinking about the disaster looming at the end of the month. That night, after Liam was asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, scrolling through job listings that all seemed to require certifications he didn't have or pay scales that wouldn't cover his rent. His phone buzzed with a text from his landlord. "Rent is 3 weeks overdue. Need payment by Friday, or we'll have to discuss other options." He had $62 in his checking account. Rent was $800. His next paycheck would cover it, barely, but that left nothing for food or electricity or the 100 other expenses that came with keeping a child alive and healthy. From her room, Vivian's voice drifted through the thin walls. She was on a call, her tone professional and cool. "No, the offer is final. If they can't meet our terms, we'll move to the secondary targets. We have options." Marcus wondered what she did for work. She had never specified, had only mentioned something vague about administrative support. But the way she spoke, the confidence in her voice, suggested someone who was used to being listened to, used to getting what she wanted. He closed his laptop and went to bed, but sleep was a long time coming. When it finally arrived, it brought dreams of falling, of reaching for Liam's hand and watching the boy slip through his fingers, of standing on a street corner with a cardboard sign, invisible to everyone who passed. At 2 a.m, Vivian sat in her room with her phone pressed to her ear. Russell Kane sounded tired, but alert. "The shop sale. You wanted details." She had been waiting for this call since late afternoon, when her monitoring systems had flagged unusual financial activity connected to Marcus. "Tell me." "The buyer is Riverstone Development. They're offering $1.2 million for the property. Plan to demolish and build luxury apartments. The owner, Walter Murphy, is accepting because of health issues. Sale closes November 30th. "What about the employees?" "Riverstone has their own contractors. Everyone currently working at the shop will be terminated." Vivian's mind was already calculating possibilities. "I want that property. Set up a shell company, multiple layers of ownership. Make it look like a regional investment firm. Offer $1.5 million, but with one condition that's non-negotiable. All current employees keep their jobs." That's going to raise questions. Why would an investment firm care about keeping a bunch of mechanics? Because we're demonstrating a commitment to the community, supporting local workers, maintaining neighborhood character. Whatever story you need to sell, just make it happen. You're doing this for him, aren't you? The husband. Vivian said nothing, which was answer enough. "V, you need to be careful. The more you manipulate his life, the harder it's going to be when he finds out who you really are." "I know." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're setting up a situation where he's going to feel like you've been pulling strings behind his back. Which, to be fair, you have been. I'm protecting him. Maybe, or maybe you're protecting yourself from having to watch him struggle. There's a difference." She ended the call without responding to that, because Russell was right, and they both knew it. But she couldn't stop herself. The thought of Marcus losing the shop, of watching him spiral into the kind of desperation that made people make terrible choices, was unbearable. She had spent 12 years invisible, watching from the shadows as people dismissed her and overlooked her and treated her like she didn't matter. And now she had the power to change things, to fix problems, to make the lives of the people she cared about better. The fact that Marcus didn't know she was doing it seemed like a technicality. 1 week later, Walter Murphy called Marcus into his office with an expression that mixed confusion with something approaching wonder. "Son, something happened. Something I can't explain." Marcus's first thought was health-related. A stroke, maybe, or another round of chest pains. "Are you okay? Do you need me to drive you somewhere?" No, nothing like that. It's the shop. The sale." What about it? Walter leaned back in his chair, shaking his head slowly. It fell through. Or rather, it didn't fall through exactly. Riverstone got outbid. By a lot. Some investment firm I've never heard of came in with an offer $500,000 higher than what Riverstone was offering. The words didn't make sense. Marcus tried to process them, to understand what they meant. Who would do that? The property's worth maybe $1.3 million at most. That's what I said. But here's the really strange part. The investment firm, they only had one condition for the sale. Just one. What condition? That all current employees keep their jobs. No terminations, no staff changes. Everyone stays, including you. Marcus felt something cold settle into his stomach. The timing was too perfect. The stipulation too specific. The whole thing too convenient. What's the name of the investment firm? Walter consulted his paperwork. Meridian Holdings. Ever heard of them? No. But even as he said it, Marcus's mind was racing. An anonymous buyer appearing out of nowhere with deep pockets and oddly specific conditions. A rescue that solved his problem exactly when he needed it most. Too many coincidences piling up in ways that didn't feel random anymore. That night, he came home to find Vivian in the kitchen, preparing dinner with the focus of someone following a recipe like a technical manual. She looked up when he entered, her expression neutral. How was work? Interesting. The shop isn't getting sold after all. Or rather, it is, but to someone different. Someone who wants to keep all the employees. He watched her face carefully, looking for any flicker of recognition or guilt. But Vivian's expression didn't change. That's good news, isn't it? Yeah, really good news. Surprisingly good news. Surprising how? Marcus set his keys on the counter, choosing his words with care. Just that the timing worked out so perfectly. Like someone knew exactly what I needed and made it happen. Their eyes met, and for a moment Marcus thought he saw something there. Acknowledgement, maybe. Or fear. But then Vivian turned back to her cooking. Sometimes life works out better than we expect. We should be grateful for that. He wanted to push further, to demand answers about whether she had anything to do with the sale. But part of him didn't want to know. Didn't want to confront the possibility that his wife had been manipulating events behind his back, even if those manipulations had saved his job. So instead, he helped set the table, and they ate dinner in their usual near silence, and afterward he read Liam a story while Vivian cleaned the kitchen. And if the question of who had really bought Murphy's auto repair hung between them like smoke, neither of them acknowledged it out loud. But Marcus started paying attention in ways he hadn't before, started noticing the details that didn't quite add up. The quality of Vivian's laptop, which was far more expensive than someone in administrative support could typically afford. The way she spoke on her occasional phone calls, with the authority of someone used to giving orders rather than taking them. The fact that she never seemed to worry about money, never mentioned bills or budgets or any of the financial constraints that dominated Marcus's life. He began to wonder who Vivian Ashford really was, and more importantly, why she had chosen to marry him. The Saturday afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Target parking lot as Marcus guided his cart through the automatic doors. Liam walked beside him, one hand holding Marcus's, the other clutching Rex as always. They needed groceries, mundane items that had somehow become markers of normalcy in a life that felt increasingly surreal. Marcus was comparing prices on pasta when he noticed the woman approaching. She wore a manager's badge and an expression that immediately set his instincts on alert. Her eyes had already assessed him before she opened her mouth, cataloging the worn work jacket, the careful way he checked each price tag, the brown skin that apparently required explanation in this particular aisle. "Excuse me, young man." She was looking at Liam, her voice sharp in a way that made the boy's hand tighten around Marcus's fingers. "Are you here with an adult?" Liam's confusion was visible, innocent and uncomprehending. "My daddy's right here." He pointed up at Marcus, and the woman's gaze shifted. Her assessment became more pointed, less subtle. Marcus recognized that look, had seen it in job interviews that went nowhere, in traffic stops that lasted too long, in 1,000 small interactions that taught him the world saw him differently than he saw himself. "Sir, I need to see a receipt for the items in your cart." Marcus kept his voice level, calm, the tone he had learned to use when anger would only make things worse. "I haven't checked out yet." "Store policy. We've had some issues lately with theft. Need to verify you intend to purchase these items." Other shoppers moved through the same aisle, white families with carts far fuller than Marcus's, nobody asking them for receipts they hadn't generated yet. The disparity was obvious enough that even Liam seemed to sense something wrong, his small body pressing closer to his father's leg. "What specific policy requires showing a receipt before purchase? I'd like the policy number." The woman's face flushed. "It's discretionary, based on our assessment of the situation." "Assessment of what, exactly?" The silence that followed carried weight. Other customers had stopped now, watching, some with sympathy, others with the kind of blank discomfort that came from witnessing injustice they didn't want to acknowledge. "You know what? Never mind. Have a nice day." She retreated quickly, heels clicking against the linoleum. Marcus stood there for a moment, his hands steady on the cart, even though something inside him wanted to upend the whole thing, to demand accountability, to make someone acknowledge what had just happened. But Liam was looking up at him with those wide eyes that had already seen too much loss, too much confusion. So Marcus took a breath and kept shopping. In the truck afterward, Liam's voice was small. "Daddy, why did that lady think you were stealing?" Marcus gripped the steering wheel, searching for words that would explain without traumatizing, that would prepare without embittering. "She didn't think that, buddy. She just made a mistake." "But she only asked you. She didn't ask those other people." 5 years old, and already learning lessons Marcus had hoped to delay, already seeing patterns that shouldn't exist, but did anyway. Sometimes people make assumptions based on what they see instead of who someone really is. That's their mistake, not ours. The kids at school say things sometimes about us, about how we're different. Marcus pulled the truck over into an empty parking lot. He turned in his seat to face his son fully. "Listen to me. We are not different in any way that matters. We're kind. We work hard. We love each other. Those are the things that count. People who can't see that, who judge us before they know us, that's their problem, not ours. Do you understand?" Liam nodded, but Marcus could see the seed had been planted. The understanding that the world would treat him differently because of how he looked, who his father was, what neighborhood they came from. The innocence that should have lasted years longer was already cracking. By the time they got home, Marcus's hands were shaking with suppressed rage, not at Liam, never at Liam, but at a world that made his son question his own worth before he had even lost his second set of teeth. Vivian was in the kitchen when they entered. She took one look at Marcus's face and set down whatever she had been preparing. "What happened?" "Nothing, just a long day." But Liam, with the directness of childhood, answered for him. A lady at the store thought Daddy was stealing, but he wasn't. We were just shopping. Something changed in Vivian's expression. A hardness that Marcus hadn't seen before, a flash of anger that seemed disproportionate for someone who barely knew them. Where was this? It doesn't matter. It matters. Her voice carried an edge that made Marcus look at her more carefully. This wasn't the quiet woman who cooked dinner and kept to herself. This was someone else, someone harder and more certain. Target on Morse Road. But it's handled. It's over. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like discrimination, and that's not something that should just be let go. Marcus felt something shift between them, a recognition that maybe Vivian understood more than he had given her credit for, that maybe her quiet observation had been seeing things he thought were invisible. What would you do about it? File a complaint that goes nowhere? Make a scene that accomplishes nothing except making Liam more upset? I would make sure it didn't happen again. The certainty in her voice was striking. Marcus wanted to ask what she meant, how exactly she planned to ensure something she had no control over. But Liam was tugging at his hand, asking about dinner, and the moment passed. That night, after Liam was asleep, Marcus found himself unable to settle. He opened his laptop and started searching, though he wasn't entirely sure what he was looking for. Information about Clayton Shaw, maybe. Confirmation that Nicole's new boyfriend was exactly the kind of person Marcus suspected. What he found was worse than he expected. Clayton Shaw had a history. Not criminal charges, nothing that would show up on the basic background check, but a pattern visible if you knew where to look. Lawsuits settled quietly. Women who had dated him briefly before he disappeared. Business ventures that collapsed, leaving others holding the debt. 3 previous victims that Marcus could identify through careful cross-referencing of public records and news archives. A widow in Cincinnati who had lost $400,000 to an investment scheme that turned out to be vapor. A business owner in Cleveland who had been too embarrassed to press charges after discovering the man she loved was systematically draining her accounts. A physician in Detroit who had lost nearly $1 million before realizing her romantic partner was a carefully constructed lie. The pattern was methodical. Target lonely women with resources. Present himself as a successful investor. Build trust and intimacy. Extract money through loans, investments, business opportunities that never materialized. Disappear before anyone could respond legally. And now he had attached himself to Nicole, who came from a family Marcus had always assumed had money. The Ashfords lived in that big house in Upper Arlington, belonged to country clubs, drove cars that cost more than Marcus made in a year. He was still reading when Vivian's voice came from behind him. You should be careful with that. Marcus hadn't heard her approach. She stood in the hallway wearing a robe, her expression unreadable in the dim light from his laptop screen. Careful with what? Digging into Clayton Shaw's history. Men like that don't appreciate scrutiny. You know about him. It wasn't a question. Vivian's lack of surprise at seeing Shaw's name on the screen told Marcus everything he needed to know. I know enough. He's a con artist, has been for years. Nicole is just his latest target. How do you know that? Vivian hesitated, and Marcus saw her calculating how much to reveal. I have access to certain resources, people who can look into things. What kind of resources? What do you really do, Vivian? I told you, administrative work. Administrative workers don't have private investigators on call. They don't speak on the phone like they're used to giving orders worth millions of dollars. They don't move through the world like they own it, even when they're pretending to be invisible. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unasked questions and half-hidden truths. Marcus, there are things about my life that I haven't shared with you. Things I had reasons to keep private. But I promise you, None of them change who I am in this apartment, with you and Liam. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give right now. She turned to go back to her room, but Marcus's next words stopped her. Did you buy the shop? Was that you somehow? Vivian's back stiffened, but she didn't turn around. Would it matter if it was? It would matter that you didn't tell me, that you made decisions about my life without asking. I kept you from losing your job, from losing your ability to provide for your son. If I had that power and didn't use it, what kind of person would that make me? Someone who respected my agency, my right to succeed or fail on my own terms. Now she did turn, and Marcus saw something in her face that looked almost like pain. I watched my father lose everything because he was too proud to accept help, too certain that asking for assistance was the same as admitting weakness. You want to know what that pride got him? An early grave and a family that barely survived. So forgive me if I don't think letting people suffer needlessly is somehow more noble than actually solving problems. She disappeared into her room before Marcus could respond, leaving him alone with his laptop and the uncomfortable realization that he knew almost nothing about the woman he had married. Across the city, in an apartment that cost 3 times what Marcus paid for his entire living space, Clayton Shaw stared at his phone with growing frustration. Every deal he touched seemed to disintegrate. Every contact he called suddenly had reasons why they couldn't move forward. Every financial institution he approached found problems with his credit, his references, his timeline. It had been 3 weeks since Marcus married Vivian, and in those 3 weeks, Clayton's carefully constructed world had begun to collapse. Nicole sat on his couch, mascara running, holding yet another declined credit card. Clayton, what's happening? You said you had money. You said the deal was almost done. It's temporary, just a cash flow issue. Everything's tied up in investments right now. That's what you said last week, and the week before. He wanted to snap at her, to tell her to shut up and let him think. But Nicole was still useful, still connected to a family that might have resources he could tap. So he forced his voice into something approximating patience. Baby, you have to trust me. These things take time. But I promise you, once the Midwestern freight acquisition goes through, we'll have more money than you can imagine. What if it doesn't go through? What if someone else gets it? That won't happen. I've been working this deal for months. I have relationships with the sellers, inside information. Nobody else can compete with what I'm offering. But even as he said it, Clayton knew he was lying. The Midwestern freight deal was already slipping away. Another bidder had appeared out of nowhere, offering terms he couldn't match. His credit lines were frozen. His business partners had stopped returning calls. Someone was sabotaging him. Someone with resources and reach and a level of sophisticated financial manipulation that suggested serious money. He thought about the timing, about when things had started falling apart, about the one variable that had changed in his carefully controlled equation. Nicole, your Aunt Vivian. What do you actually know about her? Nicole wiped her eyes, confused by the question. Not much. She's always been kind of pathetic. Never married, never made anything of herself. The family mostly ignores her. But she married Marcus, right after you left him. Doesn't that seem strange to you? I guess. But Vivian's always been weird. Probably just felt sorry for him. Clayton wasn't so sure. Something about the timeline bothered him. About the way everything had started to unravel right when Marcus and Vivian got married. He pulled up his laptop and started searching, looking for any connection between Vivian Ashford and the forces that were currently destroying his life. What he found was nothing. No social media presence, no professional profiles, no digital footprint beyond the most basic public records. For someone in their late 30s, Vivian Ashford was remarkably invisible, which Clayton had learned through years of successful cons usually meant someone was hiding something. I need you to find out more about your aunt, where she works, what she does, who she knows. Can you do that? Nicole looked uncertain. I guess, but why does it matter? Because I think she might be more than she seems, and if she is, that could solve both our problems. 2 days later, Marcus was finishing up a brake job when Walter called him into the office. The old man looked older than usual, the tremor in his hands more pronounced. Got something I need to tell you, son. About the sale. Marcus set down his tools and followed Walter inside, his stomach already tightening with anticipation of bad news. The buyer, Meridian Holdings, they want to meet with you. Meet with me? Why? They're talking about transition planning. Want to make sure the business keeps running smoothly under new ownership. Asked specifically about you, about your role here, about whether you'd be interested in taking on more responsibility. This should have felt like good news, recognition, opportunity, a chance to advance. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something else was happening beneath the surface. When? Next week. They're sending someone from their management team. After the meeting, Marcus drove home with questions multiplying in his mind. He walked into the apartment to find Vivian at her laptop as usual, but this time her screen was visible before she could minimize it. Financial reports, market analyses, documents with logos he didn't recognize and numbers that seemed impossibly large. She closed the laptop quickly, but not quickly enough. What was that? Work. That didn't look like administrative work. That looked like executive-level financial reports. Vivian stood, her expression hardening into something defensive. Marcus, I've told you there are parts of my life I keep private. That hasn't changed. Meridian Holdings wants to meet with me, to discuss my role at the shop. Is that a coincidence? She said nothing, which was answer enough. How much of my life have you been controlling? How many strings have you pulled that I don't know about? I haven't controlled anything. I've helped where I could. There's a difference. The difference is whether I get to choose, whether I get to make my own decisions, take my own risks, fail on my own terms if that's what happens. His voice was rising now, all the frustration and confusion of the past weeks boiling over. But before Vivian could respond, a small voice interrupted from the hallway. Why are you fighting? Liam stood in his pajamas, Rex clutched to his chest, tears already forming in his eyes. The fear on his face was the kind that came from having heard adults fighting before, from knowing that raised voices could precede terrible changes. Marcus felt his anger drain away instantly, replaced by guilt. We're not fighting, buddy. Just talking. You sound angry, like you're going to leave. The accusation hit harder than any blow. Marcus crossed to his son and knelt down. I'm not leaving. I promise I'm not leaving. But Liam wasn't looking at him. The boy's eyes were fixed on Vivian. Are you leaving, Ellie? Something crumbled in Vivian's carefully maintained composure. She crossed the room and knelt beside Marcus, her voice gentle in a way Marcus had rarely heard. No, sweetheart. I'm not leaving either. Your daddy and I just had a disagreement, but that doesn't mean anyone is going anywhere. Promise? I promise. Liam looked between them, his 5-year-old mind trying to process adult complications that shouldn't have been his burden to carry. Can we all sit together, like a family? Marcus and Vivian exchanged a glance, all their unresolved tensions suddenly less important than the boy standing between them, asking for something so simple and so impossible to deny. They sat on the couch, Liam between them, his small hands reaching for both of theirs. He pulled them together until Marcus's fingers brushed against Vivian's, until they were all connected in a circle that felt fragile and necessary at the same time. This is better. This is how families are supposed to be. Marcus felt the warmth of Vivian's hand in his, felt his son's weight against his side, and wondered how they had arrived at this strange configuration, how a marriage of convenience had somehow become something that mattered, how a woman he barely knew had become someone whose absence would leave a hole. After Liam fell asleep between them, still holding both their hands, Marcus spoke quietly. I don't know what to do with this, with us, with whatever we're becoming. Vivian's response was equally soft. Neither do I. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't have to have it all figured out. I need to know I can trust you, that you're not making decisions about my life without telling me. And I need you to understand that watching you struggle when I have the power to help feels like slowly drowning. I can't do nothing. So where does that leave us? Vivian looked down at their sleeping son. It leaves us here, trying to figure out how to be a family when neither of us really knows what that means anymore. The next morning brought an email that changed everything. Marcus was checking his phone while Liam ate breakfast when he saw the message from an address he didn't recognize. Mr. Hayes, you're asking the right questions, but you're not seeing the full picture. Check the Ashford family business holdings. Ask your wife about V. Reed. You've been sleeping next to someone who could change everything with one phone call. Question is, will she? Marcus stared at the screen, his coffee growing cold in his hand. V. Reed. The name felt familiar, like something he had seen or heard but couldn't quite place. He opened a browser and typed the name into a search engine. The results that came back made his breath catch. V. Reed, CEO and founder of Apex Capital, one of the most successful investment firms in the Midwest. Net worth estimated at over $2 billion. Photograph unavailable, personal information carefully guarded, but the business accomplishments were staggering. Real estate portfolios across 3 states, venture capital investments in dozens of successful startups, a reputation for being brilliant, ruthless when necessary, and almost pathologically private. And then Marcus saw it, one of the subsidiary companies listed under the Apex Capital umbrella. Meridian Holdings, the company that had bought the shop, the company that had saved his job, the company that wanted to meet with him next week. His hands had gone numb. He looked up from his phone to find Vivian watching him from across the room, her face carefully neutral, but her eyes held something that might have been fear. When were you planning to tell me? His voice came out flat, all emotion compressed into something that felt almost like calm. Vivian set down the dish she had been washing. Tell you what? Don't. Please don't lie to me right now. He held up his phone, showing her the search results. Her expression barely changed, but Marcus saw the acknowledgement in the way her shoulders dropped slightly. How long have you known? I got an email this morning. Anonymous. Someone wanted to make sure I found out. Vivian's jaw tightened. She pulled her own phone from her pocket and typed something quickly, then looked back at Marcus. We need to talk. Really talk. But not here, not with Liam in the next room. I think we need to talk right now. Marcus, please. Give me a few hours to arrange things properly, to make sure we can have this conversation without interruptions, without anyone overhearing things that could complicate everything. Complicate what? Your secret life? Your billions of dollars you somehow forgot to mention? My reasons for keeping quiet. My reasons for marrying you. My reasons for a lot of things you deserve to understand before you make any decisions about what happens next. Liam appeared in the doorway then, still in his pajamas. Daddy, can Ellie take me to school today? I want to show her my classroom. Marcus looked at his son, then at Vivian, then back at the phone in his hand that had just shattered his understanding of everything. Yeah, buddy. Ellie can take you to school. After they left, Marcus sat in the empty apartment and tried to process what he had learned. His wife was a billionaire. His job had been saved by his wife's money. The quiet woman who had fumbled through making pancakes controlled more wealth than he could comprehend, and she had never told him any of it. He thought about the Target incident, about Vivian's certainty that she could make sure it didn't happen again, about the way she spoke on phone calls with the authority of someone used to being obeyed, about the expensive laptop and the designer clothes he had never noticed because she wore them so carefully, so subtly. Everything had been hidden in plain sight. He just hadn't known to look. His phone buzzed again. A text from Vivian. Tonight, after Liam is asleep, I'll tell you everything, and then you can decide what you want to do. But please, for his sake, let's not make any decisions while he's awake to witness them. Marcus typed back a single word. Okay, but he knew that after tonight, nothing would ever be the same. Marcus had told Vivian he would wait until after Liam was asleep to hear her explanation. But sleep was impossible. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, watching headlights from passing cars sweep across the walls like searchlights hunting for something lost. V. Reed, Apex Capital, $2.1 billion. The numbers felt abstract, impossible. Marcus had spent his entire adult life calculating in hundreds, 800 for rent, 62 in the bank, $19.95 for Liam's dinosaur backpack. His mental ledger dealt in grocery store math, not the kind of wealth that appeared in business magazines and financial reports. Around midnight, he heard Vivian's door open, soft footsteps in the hallway, the click of the front door. Marcus rose and went to the window. In the parking lot below, Vivian stood next to a car he had never seen before. Black sedan, luxury brand, probably worth more than every vehicle Marcus had ever owned combined. A man in a dark suit handed her something, spoke briefly, then drove away. She stood there alone for several minutes, her posture rigid, before returning inside. Marcus was waiting in the kitchen when she entered. I thought we were going to talk after Liam was asleep. Vivian startled, then seemed to gather herself. I needed to arrange some things, to make sure we could have this conversation without interruptions. Who was that man? Russell Kane, my head of security. The phrase hung in the air between them. Head of security. The kind of position that implied threats worth protecting against, assets worth safeguarding, a life Marcus knew nothing about. How long have you been planning this conversation? Since the moment you looked at your phone this morning. I knew someone had sent you that information. I knew we were out of time. Marcus pulled out a chair and sat. His legs felt unsteady. Do you know who sent it? I have suspicions. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me. Vivian remained standing, her hands clasped in front of her like a defendant awaiting verdict. Probably Clayton Shaw, or someone he hired. He's been looking into me for weeks, trying to figure out why all his deals are falling apart. He must have finally connected enough dots. So he knows who you are. He knows there's someone with resources working against him. I don't think he's put together that it's me specifically. Not yet. Marcus processed this information slowly, feeling like he was assembling a puzzle with pieces from different boxes. The shop. Meridian Holdings. That's you. Yes. The money that's been destroying Clayton's cons. That's you too. Yes. What else? What else have you done that I don't know about? Vivian's composure wavered. I've made sure your rent is current. The landlord thinks there was an accounting error that resulted in overpayment months ago. I've set up a trust fund for Liam's education that he can't access until he's 18. I've been monitoring the shop's finances to ensure the transition to new ownership doesn't affect your position or salary. Each revelation felt like a small detonation in Marcus's chest. You've been controlling my entire life. I've been trying to help. Without asking, without telling me, without giving me any choice in the matter. His voice was rising now, the anger he had been suppressing all day finally finding release. Do you have any idea what it feels like to discover that everything you thought you accomplished on your own was actually being manipulated by someone else? That every problem that got solved, every crisis that got averted was because my wife was pulling strings I couldn't even see? I do know. The quiet certainty in her voice stopped him. What? Vivian moved to the window, looking out at the dark parking lot where moments before she had stood receiving instructions from her security chief. 12 years ago, I fell in love with someone. His name was Dylan Pierce. We were together for 2 years, and I thought he was going to be my forever. Her voice carried a quality Marcus had never heard before. Not the careful control she usually maintained, but something raw beneath it. When my company started succeeding, when the money started coming in, he changed. Or maybe he didn't change. Maybe I just finally saw who he had always been. He didn't want me anymore. He wanted what I could provide, access to my network, status in circles he couldn't reach on his own, a shortcut to the life he thought he deserved. Marcus said nothing, sensing that interruption would shatter whatever fragile thing was happening. When I caught him with another woman, do you know what he told me? She turned from the window to face Marcus directly. He said no one would ever love me for myself, that I was nothing without my money, that anyone who pretended otherwise was just a better liar than he had been. The pain in her voice was palpable, a wound that had never properly healed. And part of me believed him. So I became invisible. I stopped telling people who I was. I wore clothes that attracted no attention. I let my own family think I was a failure, because at least then, no one would want anything from me except pity. And pity I could handle. Marcus felt his anger beginning to shift into something more complicated. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked what else I've done that you don't know about. The answer is, I've spent 12 years terrified that Dylan was right, that nobody could see past the money to whatever might be underneath, that I would spend my entire life alone because I couldn't risk finding out. She moved closer, and Marcus saw tears gathering in her eyes for the first time since he had known her. And then I met you. Or rather, I had known you for 2 years at family gatherings, watching you be kind to people who dismissed you, watching you put your son before everything else, watching you treat everyone with dignity regardless of how they treated you back. Vivian, let me finish. Please. He nodded, and she continued. When Nicole left you at that engagement party, I saw an opportunity. Not to help you, though I told myself that's what it was. I saw a chance to test whether Dylan had been right, whether someone could choose me when they thought I had nothing, whether the invisible version of myself was enough. The confession settled between them like something fragile and dangerous. And when you said yes, when you married me knowing only that I was the family failure with nothing to offer, I felt something I hadn't felt in 12 years. Hope. The possibility that maybe I wasn't nothing after all. Marcus stood, closing the distance between them. You're not nothing. You've never been nothing. But you didn't know that when you married me. You knew the person I pretended to be, not who I actually am. And now that you know the truth, everything changes. Does it have to? The question surprised both of them. Vivian's tears spilled over. How can it not? I'm not who you thought I was. I have resources and power and a life so far removed from yours that we might as well be living on different planets. And I've been using all of that to manipulate your circumstances without your knowledge or consent. To protect me. Is there a difference? Marcus thought about his son sleeping in the next room, about the nightmares Liam had been having less frequently since Vivian arrived, about the way the boy's face lit up when Ellie read him stories about brave little lions walking through scary jungles. Yeah, there's a difference. Protection comes from love. Manipulation comes from control. The question is, which one were you actually doing? Vivian's voice broke. I don't know anymore. Maybe both. Maybe I convinced myself I was protecting you, when really I was just protecting myself from having to watch you struggle. Russell said the same thing. That the more I manipulated your life, the harder it would be when you found out. Russell sounds smart. He is. And he was right. Marcus reached out and took her hand. The contact seemed to shock her. I'm angry. I'm not going to pretend I'm not. Finding out that my wife is a secret billionaire who's been pulling strings behind my back feels like betrayal, even if your intentions were good. I know. But I'm also trying to understand why you did it. And I think I'm starting to. He pulled her closer, and she came without resistance. You've been hiding for 12 years because someone told you that your real self wasn't worth loving. And I've been hiding for different reasons, but hiding all the same. From the possibility of being hurt again. From the risk of trusting someone new. From the chance that maybe happiness was still possible after everything I'd lost. Vivian's tears soaked into his shirt. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you. I wanted to. Every single day I wanted to. But I was terrified that the moment you knew, you would look at me differently. That you would start wanting things from me instead of just wanting me. Marcus rested his chin on top of her head. I don't want your money, Vivian. I want you to stop making decisions about my life without asking me first. I want you to trust that I'm strong enough to handle my own problems, even if the solutions aren't as clean as the ones you could buy. And I want you to believe that when I chose to marry you, I chose the person you actually are, not some performance you were giving. How can you know that when you didn't know who I actually was? Because the parts that matter haven't changed. You still sit with Liam when he has nightmares. You still learn to cook even though you could hire a chef. You still live in this cramped apartment instead of somewhere that fits your actual life. Those aren't things money makes someone do. Those are things love makes someone do. The word hung between them, spoken aloud for the first time. Vivian pulled back enough to look at him. Love? Marcus felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with secrets or revelations. Yeah, love. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you first told Liam that being brave means walking even when you're scared. Maybe when you burned those pancakes trying to make him happy. Maybe it was building the whole time, and I just finally noticed. Marcus, I'm not who you think I am. You're exactly who I think you are. You're just also other things too. That doesn't change what matters. Vivian's hands found his face. I love you too. I've been in love with you for months and terrified to admit it because I thought the moment you knew everything, it would all fall apart. It hasn't fallen apart. Not yet. Not ever. Not if we don't let it. They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, while the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, and Marcus understood that this was the real beginning. Everything before had been preparation, protection, performance. This was the moment they chose each other, knowing the full truth. This was when their marriage actually started.